The wind howled outside, the sound of branches scratching against the windowpane filling the room with an eerie ambience. Sarah, a young woman in her mid-20s, sat alone in her small apartment, trying to distract herself from the unsettling feeling that something wasn't right. She'd been feeling like this for days, as if something was watching her every move. Despite her best efforts to brush it off, the feeling persisted, growing stronger with each passing day. She tried to convince herself it was just her imagination, but deep down, she knew it was something more sinister. One night, she woke up to a sound in her room. Her heart raced as she looked around, but there was nothing out of place. She brushed it off as another one of her fears and went back to sleep. But the next night, it happened again. This time, when she opened her eyes, she saw something standing at the foot of her bed. It was a dark figure, tall and imposing, with no discernible features. Sarah's blood ran cold as it took a step toward her. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. She was paralyzed with fear. The figure continued to approach her, and she felt a coldness surround her. It was like a black hole, sucking all the warmth out of the room. She could barely breathe, and her heart was beating so fast she thought it would burst. Suddenly, the figure vanished, and the coldness dissipated. Sarah was left alone in her room, trembling and unsure of what had just happened. She knew she had to tell someone, but who would believe her? The next day, Sarah decided to seek help from a paranormal investigator. She told him everything that had happened, hoping that he could provide some answers. The investigator listened intently and then began to question her. "Have you had any other strange occurrences?" he asked. Sarah thought for a moment and then recalled a few other strange things that had happened over the past few days, including unexplained noises and the feeling of being watched. The investigator nodded. "I think we may be dealing with a malevolent spirit here. Something that wants to harm you." Sarah's heart sank. She had hoped it was just her imagination, but now she was faced with the terrifying reality that something was after her. The investigator suggested that they investigate her apartment that evening. They set up cameras and audio recorders in every room and waited. As the night wore on, nothing out of the ordinary happened. But then, around midnight, the audio recorder in Sarah's room picked up a faint whisper. They played it back, and it was a chilling voice that said, "I'm watching you." Sarah's blood ran cold as she heard the recording. She knew now that it wasn't just her imagination. Something was definitely after her. The investigator continued to investigate, and they found evidence of a dark history in the building. It had been the site of several gruesome murders over the years. Sarah realized that the spirit that was haunting her was one of the victims. But how could she put the spirit to rest? The investigator suggested that they perform a ritual to help the spirit move on to the other side. Together, they performed the ritual, and as they did, Sarah felt the presence in her room begin to dissipate. She could feel the coldness lifting, and the feeling of being watched began to fade. By the end of the ritual, the room felt warm and inviting, as if the darkness had been lifted. Sarah knew that the spirit had finally moved on, and she was safe once again. From that day forward, Sarah never felt the same eerie presence again. She knew that she had faced her fears and emerged victorious, and she could sleep.